Have you ever seen this happen? A small brand just pops up and totally takes down an industry giant. You might think it's all about money, right? Nope. It's about having a way smarter strategy. And today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to break down the exact playbook these underdogs use to become billion-dollar legends.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a classic David versus Goliath story. For years, Axe was the absolute king of the deodorant world in India. I mean, they were untouchable. And then, bam, seemingly out of nowhere, this new challenger, Fogg, steps into the ring and just takes the crown. The big question is, how in the world did they pull that off?
So the answer, well, it wasn't about having a bigger ad budget or some super flashy campaign. Not at all. The real secret was that Fogg understood a problem that the big guy, Axe, had totally missed. And honestly, Fogg's takedown of Axe is a perfect masterclass in how these challenger brands think.
Okay, so check this out. This really shows the huge difference in how they were thinking. Axe was selling an idea, right? A feeling. They were all about fragrance and the promise of attraction. But Fogg, they honed in on a real everyday frustration that people had. You know the one. These deodorants are pricey and they run out super fast because they're mostly just gas. So Fogg just completely flipped the script. Their promise was pure value. No gas, just more actual product for your money.
And you know what's so smart? They didn't just tell people this, they showed them visually. Their ads had this brilliant, super simple demonstration. They'd take two glasses. In one, they'd spray a competitor's deodorant. In the other, Fogg. And what happened? The competitor's spray, full of gas, left like a tiny puddle. But Fogg's pure liquid spray filled the glass right up. That one image, that single visual, hammered home their value for money promise and led to one of the most famous catchphrases in Indian advertising history.
So here's the really crucial point, the big takeaway from this. Challenger brands, they don't win by playing the same old game as the giants. No way. They win because they find the unseen problems, those little everyday annoyances that the big companies are either too big or maybe just too comfortable to even notice. And that brings us to our very first core principle. And the guy behind Fogg, Darshan Patel, he is an absolute master of this. Seriously. He's not sitting around reading spreadsheets and market reports. He's out there observing real life. The guy built a whole empire creating these huge brands, Move for pain relief, Crack for heel care, Itch Guard, and they all came from spotting these common, unaddressed pains that literally millions of people were just putting up with. All right, let's take Move as an example. Back then, Iodex was the king. It was the go-to for any kind of pain. But Move didn't try to be just another generalist balm. Instead, they got super specific. They zeroed in on the single biggest complaint out there, back pain. And just like that, they became the back pain specialist. But here's the other brilliant part. They fixed the whole experience of using it. They got rid of that greasy, messy black stuff in a glass jar and replaced it with a clean, white cream in a super convenient tube. Boom! They carved out their own niche and just totally owned it. Okay, but what happens when the market is already crowded with specialists, right? What if you look around and you just can't find an obvious gap to squeeze into? Well, the answer is pretty simple. If you can't win the game everyone else is playing, you invent a completely new one. And that leads us right into our next principle. This idea is called category creation, and it is powerful. The dairy brand Epigamia is a perfect case study here. I mean, think about it. They were looking at going up against a true behemoth, Amul. They knew without a doubt that a head-on fight in the traditional yogurt, or dahi, market was a battle they were guaranteed to lose. So what did they do? They didn't even try to fight for the whole pie. Forget the 95% of the market. Instead, they got laser-focused on this tiny, almost overlooked sliver, just 5% of consumers. And who were these people? They were living in big cities, they were super health conscious, and this is key, they were willing to pay a bit more for a product that actually fit their specific lifestyle.
And here is where it gets really genius. They didn't sell it as yogurt you'd have with a meal. No, they positioned their Greek yogurt as a healthy, delicious snack, aimed squarely at that 4 to 6 p.m. afternoon slump. You know, when you need a little something. They even launched drinkable versions to solve the whole I don't have a spoon problem for people on the move. So by creating and then totally owning this new category of premium Greek yogurt snack, Epigamia became the #1 player in a market they literally invented from scratch. And just like that, they avoided a disastrous head-to-head fight with Amul. All right, so let's recap. You found a hidden problem. You've created your own category. So what's next? Now you have to make your brand absolutely unforgettable. And we're talking about something that goes way deeper than just a cool name or a logo. This is about building an identity that you can own forever.
Let's go back to Amul for a second, one of India's most legendary brands. Think about it. They could afford to hire any celebrity they wanted to be their brand ambassador, any A-lister. But for more than 50 years, the face of their brand has been a simple, charming cartoon girl. Why would they do that? Well, that single strategic choice is a masterclass in how you build a brand that truly lasts. The logic behind it is actually pretty simple when you break it down. A celebrity, well, they get older, their popularity can fade, they can get into controversies, or, they could just jump ship to a competitor. They're expensive, and they are a huge risk. But the Amul girl? She's timeless. She never ages, she's never going to cause a scandal, she is 100% owned by the brand, and most importantly, she's created this incredibly powerful, nostalgic connection with generations and generations of customers.
Now, a mascot isn't the only tool in the toolbox, of course. Think about brands like Parlay. They use these super sticky jingles that people can still sing decades later. Another great tactic? Simple, descriptive names. You hear make my trip, book my show, policy bazaar. You know exactly what they do instantly, no confusion. And a lot of the time, these tactics are built on a solid foundation of being affordable and being available absolutely everywhere, from the biggest cities to the smallest villages. Okay, so let's pull it all together. We've seen how Fogg brilliantly spotted a hidden problem. We saw how epigamia literally created a whole new category. And we saw how Amul built an identity that has lasted for ages. So what's the big lesson here? What can we learn from all this? Let's boil it all down into the final ultimate playbook. It really all boils down to these 4 essential rules. Rule number 1, get out there and observe the real world to find the frustrations your competitors are ignoring. Rule 2, if you can't be a top player in the current game, just invent a new one where you're the leader. 3, build a powerful, unforgettable identity that you and only you can own. And finally, rule 4, define your why. Have a purpose that goes beyond just making money, something that connects with your customers on an emotional level. That right there is the core DNA of a brand that's built to win. So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a question to think about. What's a small, everyday problem or frustration in your life that's just waiting for a smart challenger brand to come along and solve it? The next billion-dollar idea probably isn't going to come from some complex algorithm. It might just come from a simple, keen observation you make today.